Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Iman Ismail, and I am a research assistant at the College of Islamic Studies at Hamad bin Khalifa University. Yeah, I think it was the summer of 2015 or 2016 or 2017. I'm really bad with time. And my parents had decided that we're going to spend the summer in Sudan. But that also happened to be the summer that Ramadan started to overlap with our break. And so they were like, let's go for it. And I remember I was incredibly excited because I had heard so many stories from my childhood about how beautiful the Ramadan experience is back home in Sudan. And having been raised in the Philippines, where there were pretty much no Muslims around in our community, it was a very small community, and most of them were expats and most of them were not Muslim. So I didn't have that community feeling. I never understood what it meant to be raised Muslim in a community of Muslims. And so this was my one opportunity to connect with Muslims in the most beautiful way, in a place where I'm familiar with the people and where the people look like me and where they know me and they know where I'm from. And so I was really excited. I said, all right, let's go for it. It's gonna be tough, but inshallah khair, we wish for the best. And I remember my parents kept reminding us. They said, the tougher the Ramadan, the greater the rewards. And I was like, I'm all for rewards, yallah, give it to me. So we went, and it was really exciting, and the Ramadan had started. And though I was of the age where I was required to fast, my grandparents, bless them, they kept trying to convince me not to fast. They kept saying, it's okay, you're in a different environment, maybe you're required to fast by age, but we don't want you getting exhausted, we don't want you to collapse. And I was like, no, I'm gonna do this. Inshallah, Allah's gonna make it easy for me. Alhamdulillah, He did. Though it was very difficult and the electricity was off most of the time, we managed. We would go to the masjid where there was the only power generator in the entirety of our neighborhood. And we would spend our afternoons in the masjid, and we would read Quran in groups, and we would learn about our religion in groups, and we would learn about the value of community in those same groups. And I remember the greatest memory that I have from that summer was the way that we would break our fast. Because regardless of how long we've been fasting for, regardless of how hot it had been that day, the women would always prepare 2 trays of food. One for inside the house for the women who were gathering, and then one for outside of the house. And what the men of the family would do, or in my grandmother's house, for example, where only my grandfather was the man of the family, there would be a neighborhood boy who would come and take the extra tray. And the men just along the streets, they'd lay these carpets, and all the men would sit down. Anyone who was passing by, doesn't matter where they were from, they didn't even have to be Sudanese, they would be invited to come and join them and break their fast. And I remember I couldn't go out because obviously I'm a girl, and it wouldn't make sense for me to walk out on those streets and say, hey, I'm gonna take some pictures. But that was the first summer I had my camera. And so I give it to a neighborhood boy and I tell him, I would like you to take this out and I want you to take some pictures of what you see. And having been able to see the perspective of Ramadan in the streets from that boy's eyes was incredible. It was such a beautiful and eye-opening experience. My favorite picture that he took, and mind you, he was maybe 11, 12, not very old, didn't know how to use my camera. I told him all you have to do is press this button. And he took this one overhead shot of these men gathered around these 2 trays. One was the tray my grandmother had put out, one was put out by our neighbor. And I saw the different foods, and when I showed my grandmother the picture, she was judging what the other tray had in comparison to what she'd put, but that's not the point of the story. And I see these heads bowed down together, all the men with their legs crossed, all the men with their hands in the trays ready to eat. And it just felt like such a beautiful sense of community. Everyone was ready to share. Everyone was ready to engage in this breaking of the fast together. And then after 15 minutes after they eat, and the men get up together, they all walk to the masjid and they pray Maghrib. After that, they come outside again, they eat a little bit more, and then they return for Tarawih at the same masjid. And despite how difficult that Ramadan was, despite how hard it was to fast in that heat, and despite how young I was at the time, I had never felt a beautiful sense of community as I had in that time period. And I managed to fast, alhamdulillah, managed to fast all of Ramadan, managed to get through it. Really proud of myself, I have to admit. And I was so proud of the memories that I had managed to take. And no Ramadan has ever equated that same feeling of community, that same ability to give back to people and to receive from people in the same way, in the true spirit of our Prophet ﷺ. The most valuable life lesson I think I learned from this, which is something I continue and constantly learn, is that Islam is a public religion. It is a religion that invites everyone regardless of whether or not you belong to the team. But especially for those who exist within the Muslim Ummah, it is a religion of bonds. That's why family is so important. That's why it's so important that you keep up relations with your neighbors. And I saw that value in this beautiful Ramadan memory that I have and that I hold on to. And I learned more and more about what it means to be able to grow in community, especially for someone who came from a non-Muslim background, who was raised in an area such as the one I was, where my only interaction with Islam was through my family, and alhamdulillah for that. But it will never equate what it means to grow up in a beautiful community of people who are learning about Islam together and who understand the value of public religion in the way that we display our character and in the way that we display our faith. The value I'd say that this memory relates to, first and foremost, though it relates to so many different values, I'd say it's generosity. And earlier when I mentioned that my grandma saw the picture of the two trays and she was comparing what she had given versus what our neighbor had given, she was not judging what my neighbor had put out. She was judging what she put out, because she saw that and she was saying, I hadn't put it out enough. I hadn't done enough for my community. I hadn't given these men enough food to take from. And I saw that and I said, how selfless do you have to be to recognize that what is shown in this picture will never be enough? That you can always be more generous in giving away the gifts that Allah has given you, and in providing it to people who maybe are not necessarily needy. It's not like everyone in our community required something, but she simply wanted to give back in a way that she had received from that same community, and being as beautifully generous as she is. I think this story relates most comprehensively to SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, and learning how to value what we have and learning to share it as well with communities who understand responsible consumption and production. Ramadan Mubarak.